Hello. In this video we are going to be talking about tissues. So we've already established that cells are the basic unit of life. What we're going to start looking at now is how cells will come together to form tissues that ultimately are going to have similar function and are going to have a similar structure as well. Um, we will see that there are going to be multiple types of cells that make up any one particular tissue. But first, let's go into what the basic tissues are. So first of all, we have a four basic sets of tissues. They include nervous tissue, muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, and connective tissue. And these four basic tissue types will then come together. When two or more different types come together, they are going to form organs. What function your organ performs is ultimately going to depend on what tissue it's made out of. Thus, the tissue ultimately defines the function. So nervous tissue, this is the tissue that we find in our nervous system. So brain, spinal cord, nerves, etc. It's going to be involved with communication. So it allows us to control and sense our environment. Muscle tissue is what is responsible for movement, along with some types of connective tissue that the muscle tissue will connect to. There are three basic types of muscle tissue. So you have cardiac muscle tissue, smooth muscle tissue. Cardiac muscle tissue you find in the heart, smooth you find in most of the visceral organs, and then skeletal muscle, which you will find in the muscles that provide our skeleton with movement. Epithelial tissue is going to be what lines our bodies and cavities and helps to organize our body. They essentially are going to cover and protect the body while they are supported by connective tissue. You're going to find these in the hollow organ linings. So the inside of the hollow organs is referred to as the lumen, and the epithelial tissue will line the lumen. In addition to that, it's going to be the covering of our outer body, so the epidermis, and thus it'll make up a large component of the skin. And then finally, we have connective tissue. Connective tissue is responsible for providing support. It comes in many different types, including fat or adipose tissue, bone, tendon, cartilage, and other various connective tissue types that we'll talk about. So let's dive into epithelial tissues in more detail. So epithelial tissue lines and covers and generally organizes the body, helps to create order from what would otherwise be chaos. There are two basic types. There's the proper connective tissue, which covers and lines the outer and inner body. And then the other type that we haven't referred to is going to be the glandular. This is the type of epithelial tissue that forms glands that will ultimately secrete hormones and other substances. Epithelial cell tissue is highly cellular. It does have a polarity associated with it, which we'll see in the next slide, with an apical and basal border. It does have a high regenerative capacity since this is being associated with the surface of our skin and the surface of our inner organs, the lumen of them. It needs to be able to regenerate. However, it is avascular, meaning that it does not have blood supply. However, it still does need nutrients, and thus it gets this from the connective tissue that is supporting it. It is innervated, meaning that it is supplied by nerve fibers. So epithelial tissue has a apical surface. That is going to be the surface that is facing the surface or the lumen, and then it'll also have a basal end. This is going to be the end that is going to be closest to the connective tissue. Ultimately, the connective tissue is going to be separated from the epithelial tissue by a basement membrane. So this basement membrane helps to reinforce the epithelial sheet, helps it resist stretching and tearing, and ultimately defines the boundary. The epithelial sheet itself is going to be made up of the basal lamina. That is the more superficial layer, so that's going to be provided by the epithelial tissue, and the reticular lamina, which is going to be the deeper layer and is going to connect to or be contributed by the connective tissue. So the basement membrane is going to be that blue line that you see separating the epithelial cells from the connective tissue. Now, when we classify epithelial cells, there's two distinct ways that we classify them. First, we give them a name that indicates how many layers they are deep. So if we say it is a simple type of tissue, that means that it is a single layer of cells, while if we say it is stratified, that means that it contains at least 2 layers and sometimes more. The second name is going to describe the shape of the cells. So there are 3 basic shapes. The first is squamous. That is the flattened cell shape. Then you have cuboidal, which are going to be box-like. And then columnar, which are going to be more like columns. That is, their height generally is higher than their width. There are modifications to this as well. So you can have transitional epithelium, which is going to have sort of a mixture of 2 different cell types. You can have pseudostratified, which is going to be a simple tissue that looks stratified. So we're going to go into each of these in detail, talk about where in the body you can find them and some of their functions. So starting with simple squamous, you find these in the kidney as part of the glomeruli, the air sacs of the lungs, the linings of the heart, blood vessels, and lymphatic vessels, and as a part of the serosae. The functionality of this, because it is a thin cell layer, it's going to allow materials to pass by, both by filtration and diffusion. It's going to be in places where protection isn't particularly important. It is also going to, in the serosa, be responsible for secreting lubricating substances into the serosa. Simple cuboidal, so you find these, so the function of these are responsible for secretion and absorption. You find these in the kidney tubules, the ducts and secretory portions of small glands, and on the ovary surface. The simple columnar is also going to be involved with absorption. It also plays a role in secretion of mucus and enzymes. You will also find a type that is ciliated. The ciliated type are going to help propel mucus or reproductive cells. So you find this in most of the digestive tract, the gallbladder, the excretory ducts of some glands, and the small bronchi, as well as uterine tubes and portions of the uterus. Pseudostratified columnar is, again, still a single layer, but due to the different shape of the cells and the different height of the nucleus, it does appear that it is actually multi-layered. It functions to secrete mucus, also has ciliated types that help to propel the mucus. You find this in the trachea and most of the upper respiratory tract, as well as the sperm-carrying ducts and ducts of certain large glands. All right, the stratified squamous is going to be found in the esophagus, the mouth, the vagina, and the epidermis of the skin. Now, there's two distinct types of the stratified squamous tissue. You can have the non-keratinized version, or you can have the keratinized version. The non-keratinized version has live cells that are metabolically active. The thing to note, if you look at this image here, it's really that we named the type of tissue based off of the structure of the most superficial portion of it. So as you get down here deeper, you can see that they may take on more of a cuboidal form, but we still call it stratified squamous. The non-keratinized cells are still living, while the epidermis of the skin is going to be full of keratin, thus dead. Only the basal cells are going to be active in mitosis. You find this in places that the underlying tissues are subjected to a lot of abrasion. So that's why you find it on the surface of the skin as well as these other locations. Stratified cuboidal is rare. It's mostly found in some large glands, such as sweat and mammary glands. Stratified columnar are also rare. You do find it in the pharynx, the male urethra, and some glandular ducts. Transitional, so these are going to be found in the lining of the hollow urinary organs, such as the bladder. It functions, has to relate to the fact that it can stretch, thus permitting storage of the urine. All right, so that was the proper epithelia. Now we're going to look at glandular epithelia. So a gland is defined as one or more cells that make and secrete a product. So you can have some glands that are made up of a single cell, while some are going to be made up of multiple cells. The product is whatever is being secreted. It's usually going to be an aqueous fluid, meaning containing mostly water, oftentimes containing proteins, but it can be rich in lipids and steroids instead of being aqueous. We classify these based on the number of cells as well as where they secrete their product. So you can have unicellular or multicellular, and then depending on where they excrete their product, they can be endocrine, meaning internally secreting, or exocrine, meaning outward secreting. So unicellular glands are scattered within epithelial sheets. Examples of these include goblet cells that are going to be scattered within the cells of the digestive tract. Multicellular glands usually form by the invagination of an epithelial sheet into the underlying connective tissues. Most of the multicellular glands will have ducts, which are going to be tube-like connections to those epithelial sheets. So again, this is where we are looking at the type. So you have endocrine. These are also known as ductless glands. This is going to be where the ducts were initially there but were lost during development. Thus, they will secrete their hormones into the interstitial fluid, which then will enter into the blood. Its secretions are generally referred to as hormones. The exocrine glands are going to have a duct that transports secretions out to the epithelial surface. It will contain both duct cells as well as epithelial cells. All right, so this is what I said. It secretes hormones into interstitial fluid, then enters the blood in the endocrine example, where in the exocrine example, it secretes into the epithelial surface. All right, exocrine glands are going to secrete products into the body surface or cavities. These can be multicellular and diverse. You find them in things like the liver, pancreas, mucus, sweat, oil, and salivary glands. While unicellular, these are going to be directly releasing their products by exocytosis. So they produce mucin, a glycoprotein that dissolves in water, thus forming mucus. Goblet cells are an example of this. They're sprinkled in epithelial linings and intestinal and respiratory tracts, while mucus cells are not interspersed with other cells and they're not goblet shaped, such as those that you'd find in the stomach. All right, multicellular exocrine, we can classify these as simple if they do not branch. So you have a simple tubular on the left, a simple branch tubular in the middle. So the branches happen down here, and it's not going to be forming multiple ducts that are there. So the duct here is the purple cells. It's not branching, even though there are branches of the exocrine secreting cells. And then you can have simple branched alveolar. Those are going to be more rounded on the ends of them. All right, compound ones are going to be where the ducts actually branch. So you can see these purple cells that are the branch are the ducts. Those are branching and forming multiple different routes to the cells that secrete. So you have compound tubular on the left, compound alveolar that are a little bit more rounded on the ends in the middle, and then compound tubular alveolar, which are sort of a mixture of those. So you have some that are tubular and some that are more round. All right, exocrine ducts have two main modes of secretion. There's actually a third kind, but it's not thought to be significant in the human body. The types of secretion include merocrine, which you see on the bottom, and holocrine. So with merocrine, the cells are going to secrete by exocytosis. They merely secrete, while with the holocrine, the cells are going to accumulate and ultimately burst. So the mature cell dies and ultimately becomes the secretory product, while in the merocrine, it's not going to die. So examples of merocrine include the glands that you'd find in the pancreas, and sweat glands, and salivary glands, while the holocrine glands are going to be an example of those are going to be the sebaceous glands. All right, so we'll end this video here. In the next video, we will start talking about connective tissue.